Okay, this is the layout update for June 19th, 2015. Okay. I want to say first off, we're going to see some fairly significant changes very soon, as I mentioned. We bought a bunch of paint, so what we're going to do is I drew up my track plan where I want my buildings, and we're going to use the paint and make like a base color. You know, like green for under the grass, and then a tan under where there will be a dirt lot. You know, so that's what we're going to do with that. The other thing is we also have the tempered hardboard for our backdrop. We're going to cut that this weekend, hopefully. But the really major thing that'll finish out the wiring and then shift my focus off of that and much more onto the scenery, and then after scenery on the locomotives, is the signal system. All stuff has come in at a hobby shop down in KC that we use, and we're going down this tomorrow to see a friend of mine relatively close to KC and do some work on his train layout and run on it for a while. With his permission, that'll be on my page, so you can look forward to that. But the signal stuff is in, so hopefully we'll pick it up. Now, one of the best things I've found out you can do is do some research. Like, for instance, I got a DS64 for the tortoises, the turnout motors. Well, I was reading up on the SEC8, which actually controls the signals, and it can control 8 turnout motors, which is more than I'm going to need. So if I had done the research, I wouldn't have gotten the DS64. Now, I'm still going to keep the thing, because if I ever get enough room, I'm going to might add a staging yard expansion, so I'll use it for that. But the point is, do your research first. And also along that line, as you can see, I've taken this pad and I've basically drawn out my plan of how I'm going to lay these components out. Okay? So, as you can tell by the labels, these two are BD4s. Those detect the rolling stock and the locomotives on the layout, and then they send that through a 10-wire ribbon cable, which is basically like a nerve. You can take out like a nerve, to the SEC8. And I didn't draw that on here because those go directly from the BD4 to the SEC8. But what I did draw was the rest of the layout, like power supply in, the track bus, and the terminal blocks for the lines out for the toruses and the lines in for push buttons on my layout's fascia. Just give you a brief rundown real quick, but the way the BD4s work is you take one wire, you take your rail, one rail is common, in my case the black wire, which is the outermost rail to the edge, which would be this one. And then this one, or the control rail, is gapped at the end of each block. I don't know if you can see it, but I've got plastic rail joiners there, insulating rail joiners. And I did that on the edge of all my sections. So the ones for all the red wire come back through and they come to this. And then they go from there and they connect back to my command station. So as you can see on the drawing, they come out, over, down, and they come to a 4-position terminal block. There are 2 positions on that are the DC power supply in for the SEC8. And for that, I'm going to use just a 12 to 15 volt DC power supply, which we got a while ago from Radio Shack. But I'm going to cut the connector off of that, I'll run it to the terminal block, and I can set the voltage on there. So that'll be good. So that'll be the power supply for the SEC8. And then, as you might be able to tell by my label, this first row of 10-position terminal blocks are inputs. For push buttons on the fascia, and that replicates what what that replicates in real life is the dispatcher giving permission for a local crew to operate the turnout. So the dispatcher would turn off the electronic lock, and then the local crew would line the turnout, which is represented by the push buttons. And then of course the other one, which would be this row, is the line out to tortoises. And then what I didn't draw on here, but I might use terminal blocks for later, is the drive sockets out. And then those take the same 10-wire ribbon cable, which is, again, just think of it as a nerve. They go from there and they go to a control point, or an interlocking, which is a set of signals that control a certain point on the railroad. So, and for reference, I've got an example of that right here. Two signals at the top of your view govern trains coming out of the two tracks towards me. The two-headed signal, which I'm still working on, it'll set right where that hole is, and it'll govern trains going towards the top of your screen or towards the wall. So that's defined as an interlocking. And then each one of those drive sockets runs one interlocking. So two of them are the inputs from the BD4s. That leaves me 6. 2, of course, for the US and S signals, which leaves me 4. And then the remaining 4 will be for the door signals that govern access onto the control tracks, the tracks that are controlled with CTC. But I'll have one there next to that turnout where the lines are drawn on the foam. I'll have another one on that curved turnout facing towards the bottom of your screen, towards that turnout in the computer. And then I'll have another one on that side, on that section track, going from the yard onto the controlled siding, and then one there going from the yard towards the boxcars. So this system is basically divided into 3 parts. One is signals themselves, which the US and S signals, which are those, are BLMA. The doors will be BLMA, but those, they're still working on producing those, so I'm waiting for those to be released. The second part is the, what's a good word for it? Relay center, and the nerve inputs of the system, if you want to call it that, which is our BD4 and our SEC8. And then the third part is, of course, JMRI on the computer. And once I'm done programming that and adding in signal tables and a bunch of other stuff, that's like the brain. So that's the 3 parts of the signal system. Now, just in the last few minutes here, what I've done as far as preparation for the signal system is, as I mentioned before, I've already gapped one rail, and then I've divided the red wire, which is the control rail, into separate sub-buses for each section. And those run to a 10-position terminal block over there on that side of the layout. And right now I took some 18 gauge, which is what I use for the bus. I stripped it all the way, and then I wrapped that around the screw terminals, and that's just a jumper cable. So when I get the SEC8, I'll take that off, and then I'll run some more 18 gauge for each of those sections over to the SEC8. And since the black is the common, I don't have to worry about that. It goes from the rail to the terminal block and straight back to my command station, which is sitting right there. Now, the other thing I'm going to do is I'm also planning in the future, because in the future, this whole back half is going to be an engine terminal, with the cold tower, wire tower. The chutes will lower, raise and lower on them. I'll have a turntable which will also be controlled by DCC. And then of course, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but a couple of my buildings have lights. And the rest of the kits we're going to add interiors and lighting to them. And that'll interface with the DCC system. So, and this is probably still ways off in the future. But, okay, you may not be able to see it. Okay, you probably can. Just a second, let me get a flashlight here. Okay, there we go. Maybe that's better. Right there we have our circuit breaker. And basically what that does is it's very sensitive to short circuits, so it detects one and it shuts it off, and that prevents damage to your locomotives and freight cars. If it's bad enough, you can ruin a locomotive. But what I'm going to do in the future is I have that one, and that one's going to be for track power. Then I'm going to add a second, and the second will be for the accessory decoder for the turntable and the accessory decoder for the lighting system. And the reason for that is if I do something stupid and cause a short while I'm running trains, it won't shut down the lights in the buildings and vice versa. And that's just a general rule anyway, so that way if you get a short on one section, it doesn't bring your whole layout to a screeching halt. So if I ever get the staging arc extension added on to the left of the screen, I'll have yet another one, and I'll split that into two, one for the actual staging tracks and another for the roundhouse and the turntable. Which, okay, I guess I don't really need a turntable for that, but turntables are cool. So, yeah, I'm going to do it anyways. So I guess you could say that's the step one, or the planning for the installation of the signal system. Step two is going to begin the components installed, actually securing the SEC8 and getting the wiring done, and 3 is going to be the programming of JMRI and the configuring and the testing, which those last two, they'll mix at a couple points. So tomorrow we get the actual SEC8, the BD4s, but today I'm going to make a run to the hardware store, and I'm going to get the terminal blocks, and I'm going to get some more 18 gauge wire. I'm not worried about wire for the tortoise because, well, I've got a whole bunch left over. So if I need to, I'll just make another trip. But I got plenty. So there you go. There is part one of installing a signal system that does not use a Digitrax command station planning. So yeah, stay tuned for part two. Hopefully it'll be up in a couple days.